a former casino floor manager just revealed something that could change the way you gamble forever. After 12 years inside the industry, watching thousands of players, he's finally breaking his silence about the one slot machine casinos actually hate when you play, and the six machines they're desperately hoping you'll sit down at instead. What he's about to share could be the difference between walking out ahead and losing your entire bankroll, and management tried everything to keep this information from getting out. According to internal reports he's willing to share, there's one specific machine that breaks all the standard casino rules, and the math behind why it works is something they never wanted players to understand. But before we get to the six machines you should avoid at all costs, machines that former employees say are designed to take your money faster than almost anything else on the casino floor. And let me tell you about the one golden exception, the machine that former slot technicians actually call the loss leader in private staff meetings. The machine is Wheel of Fortune quarter slots. But here's the critical detail. It has to be the classic version with the actual mechanical wheel on top. Not any of the newer digital variants casinos have been trying to phase in. Former slot technicians report that this specific machine operates with an RTP between 92 and 94% on the quarter denomination, which according to insider data is significantly higher than industry standard. That might not sound like a massive difference, but over the course of a typical gambling session, that gap between 92% and the 86 to 88% you'll find on most other machines means you're losing your bankroll almost twice as slowly. But here's what makes this machine truly different, and it's something most players never realize. The mechanical wheel component, that physical spinning wheel mounted on top of the cabinet, is subject to completely different regulatory requirements than video simulations. According to former compliance officers, physical random number generators like mechanical wheels have to meet stricter fairness standards in most jurisdictions, which forces the overall game to maintain better odds. The actual wheel spin bonus triggers approximately once every 80 to 120 spins based on internal documentation, which is dramatically better than the once every 200 or 300 spins you'll see on most modern video slots. There's a documented case from a regular player named Sarah who figured this pattern out independently over a 6-month period. According to her personal records, she tracked every session on Classic Wheel of Fortune over 142 visits. And her average loss per visit was $23 on a $200 starting bankroll. Compare that to what former employees say about the machines we're about to discuss, where that same $200 can disappear in under 90 minutes, and you start to understand why casinos tolerate this one exception. The reason they keep it on the floor despite the better odds is surprisingly calculated. Former floor managers admit in internal training documents that Wheel of Fortune acts as what they call a loss leader. It attracts crowds, it creates visible excitement when that wheel spins, and most importantly, it encourages play on the surrounding machines that have significantly worse math. One former pit boss stated in a documented interview that they strategically place Wheel of Fortune classics near banks of high hold percentage games specifically to draw traffic to those areas. The quarter denomination sweet spot exists because it keeps individual bet amounts low enough that even with better RTP, the casino isn't risking substantial money on any single spin, but players feel like they're getting more playtime for their budget. But here's the catch that makes this machine's existence possible. The maximum payout is considerably lower than those massive progressive jackpots you see advertised on newer machines. You're not going to hit a $100,000 grand prize on Classic Wheel of Fortune quarters. What you're getting instead is consistency, smaller wins that happen more frequently, bonus rounds that actually trigger often enough to keep your bankroll alive. Former technicians report the hit frequency, meaning any win at all, runs around 28 to 32% of spins, compared to 18 to 22% on most modern video slots. Now that you understand the one machine where the math works more in your favor, let me tell you about machine number 1, Buffalo Gold. And if Wheel of Fortune is the player's friend, Buffalo Gold is the casino's most effective weapon, according to multiple former employees. The quarter denomination version typically has an RTP between 86 and 88% based on internal data, and while that might only sound a few percentage points worse than Wheel of Fortune, the real destruction comes from the volatility structure. Buffalo Gold operates on what's called a super bonus system, where the game dangles the possibility of massive multipliers during free spin rounds. Former slot technicians report that the super bonus, the one that actually pays life-changing money, triggers approximately once every 600 to 800 spins on average. But here's the trap. The regular bonus, which is what you'll hit most of the time, triggers around once every 120 to 150 spins and typically pays between 12 and 30 times your bet. That sounds reasonable until you do the actual math. If you're betting 40 cents per spin, which is the minimum on most Buffalo Gold machines, you're spending $48 to $60 in wagers just to trigger a bonus that pays $4.80 to $12 on average. A former casino host named Michael kept a detailed spreadsheet over a 3-month period, documented in casino player tracking records, and he recorded going 340 spins between bonus triggers twice in a single session. At 40 cents per spin, that's $136 in wagers to trigger a bonus round that paid him $8.40. But what makes Buffalo Gold particularly insidious, according to former employees, is the near-miss programming on Buffalo symbols. The game makes Buffalo symbols appear on the first, second, and fourth reel, showing you exactly what you need to trigger the bonus, and then the third reel lands one position off. Former technicians who've accessed the programming specifications say this near-miss pattern occurs at a rate roughly 4 times higher than true random distribution would produce. And what that means in practical terms is your brain is being tricked into thinking you're almost winning far more often than the actual math supports. The sound design amplifies this psychological manipulation. Every near miss triggers the same audio cue as an actual minor win, a rising crescendo of drums and chimes that creates what former employees call the addiction layer. Thus, one floor supervisor admitted in a documented exit interview that management specifically loved when players camped on Buffalo Gold, because the combination of occasional medium wins and constant near misses kept people in their seats longer than almost any other game on the floor. And if you think that volatility structure is predatory, wait until you hear about machine number 2, Lightning Link, which takes the hold and spin concept and weaponizes it in ways that former employees say made them uncomfortable watching elderly players chase bonuses. The base game RTP sits at approximately 87%, according to internal documentation. But the real damage comes from how the bonus feature math works against you in a way that feels rewarding, even as it drains your bankroll. The hold and spin bonus, that feature where you collect symbols and hope for more to land, triggers roughly once every 120 to 150 spins, based on former technician reports. There's a documented case involving a player named Jennifer, whose casino tracking statement showed she spent $3,200 over a weekend, triggered the bonus feature 28 times, and walked away with a net loss of $2,100. The mathematics behind why that happens reveal the core deception. Lightning Link requires a minimum bet of 6 credits on most denominations to activate the hold and spin feature, which immediately puts your cost per spin higher than you might realize. At quarter denomination, you're betting $1.50 minimum every single spin. Over those 120 to 150 spins it takes to trigger a bonus, you've invested $180 to $225 in wagers. Former employees report that the majority of hold and spin bonuses, approximately 70% based on internal analysis, all pay between 10 and 25 times your bet. That means your $1.50 wager triggers a bonus that pays $15 to $37.50, which sounds exciting until you realize you just spent over $200 to get there. But here's where the psychological manipulation becomes particularly cruel, according to former technicians. The hold and spin feature shows you empty positions on the screen, and as each symbol locks, you see exactly how many spaces remain. Your brain starts calculating the potential if just one more ball lands. If just one more symbol appears, you could hit the grand jackpot displayed at the top of the screen. Former slot technicians call this the one more ball mechanism, and a former sound designer who worked on these games admitted in a documented interview that the audio progression was specifically engineered to intensify with each symbol that locks. creating a crescendo of anticipation that triggers dopamine response even when the bonus ends up paying barely more than your investment to trigger it. One former employee described Dragon Link as Lightning Link's aggressive older sibling. And according to internal documentation, that's not just marketing differentiation, that's mathematical reality. Machine number 3, Dragon Link operates with an RTP range between 85 and 88%, based on reports from former technicians. And what makes this machine particularly devastating is how the multi-denomination structure creates a false impression that higher bets improve your actual odds proportionally. Former floor managers admit in documented interviews that players consistently believed betting a dollar per spin rather than 50 cents would double their chances at the progressive jackpots. But the internal math doesn't support that assumption. The hold percentage remains virtually identical across denominations. You're just losing money twice as fast. There's a heartbreaking case involving an elderly man named Robert that a former slot attendant documented in detail. According to her testimony, she watched him cash his Social Security check at the cage, convert $800 to credits, and sit at Dragon Link for 4 consecutive hours on a Tuesday afternoon. The bonus feature triggered 3 times during that entire session, and the largest payout he received was 18 times his bet of $2.50, a $45 win that felt significant in the moment, but represented less than 6% of what he'd already fed into the machine. What made this particular case stick with the former employee was that Robert kept pointing at the progressive meters displayed at the top of the cabinet, convinced he was close to hitting the grand jackpot because the number looked substantial. But former technicians report that the grand progressive on Dragon Link triggers approximately once every 2,000 to 3,000 spins on average. And at $2.50 per spin, the mathematical investment required would be $5,000 to $7,500 in total wagers just to reach the average trigger point. The Dragon theme itself isn't accidental, according to former marketing consultants who've worked with slot manufacturers. Internal research documents show that mythological creatures, particularly dragons associated with treasure and fortune in Asian cultures, correlate with increased risk-taking behavior in players. The visual design creates a subconscious association between the game and ancient wealth, and when combined with the progressive meters that slowly climb with each spin across the entire casino network, players develop what former employees call the proximity illusion. The belief that because the number is large and visible, it must be close to paying out. Before we get to the 3 worst machines on this list, I need to pause here because what I'm about to share comes directly from internal reports that former employees genuinely risked their professional relationships to document. These aren't casual observations. These are years of compiled data across multiple casino properties, tracking specific machines and specific player behaviors that management never intended for public knowledge. If this information is valuable to you, if you want to protect yourself with knowledge that casinos have spent millions trying to keep quiet, make sure you're subscribed because the patterns we're about to discuss get significantly darker. Let me know in the comments, have you played any of these machines? Have you noticed these exact patterns in your own sessions? Because the validation from other players is part of what gave these former employees the courage to come forward. Machine number 4, Buffalo Diamond, represents something particularly insidious, according to former slot technicians: the deliberate degradation of a game player's already trusted. Buffalo Diamond looks almost identical to the original Buffalo slots that many players spent years developing familiarity with. But according to internal documentation, the RTP dropped to a range between 84 and 87% when the Diamond version was introduced. The Diamond bonus feature that was added sounds like an enhancement, an extra way to win, but former employees report that the base game hit frequency was simultaneously reduced to compensate. What that means in practical terms is you're waiting longer between any wins at all, and when the Diamond bonus does trigger, the average payout based on internal analysis runs between 6 and 12 times your total bet, barely enough to recover the investment required to trigger it. There's a story connected to this machine that we'll return to, a case that fundamentally changed how one former floor manager viewed his role in the industry. But the mathematical foundation you need to understand first is that casinos specifically push the Diamond version over original Buffalo because the hold percentage improvement translates to millions in additional revenue, annually across their networks. Machine number 5, 88 Fortunes, and this is the machine I mentioned earlier, the one connected to a story that fundamentally altered how multiple former employees viewed their casino careers. The always pay system sounds player friendly. When you first hear it explained, 243 different ways to create winning combinations. Sounds like dramatically better odds than traditional pay lines. But former slot technicians report that the individual line pay values are reduced proportionally to compensate. The base RTP across denominations runs between 85 and 87%, according to internal documentation. And what makes this machine particularly effective at draining bankrolls is how the FU BAT progressive system creates pattern recognition illusions that keep players chasing symbols that appear far more frequently than they actually pay. The four progressive levels, mini, minor, major, and grand, are displayed prominently above the cabinet, and those gold FU BAT symbols seem to land constantly. But former technicians report that completing a full screen of gold symbols to trigger the major progressive happens approximately once every 5,000 to 8,000 spins on average. The story that changed everything involves a woman named Catherine, a 67-year-old widow who received a $40,000 life insurance payout after her husband passed away from cancer. A former slot attendant provided detailed testimony about watching Catherine over a 3-day period in March of 2019. Yeah, and what made this case impossible to forget was how methodical the destruction became. Catherine arrived on a Friday afternoon and immediately positioned herself at an 88 Fortunes machine near the high limit salon. And according to player tracking records that the former employee accessed, she converted $8,000 to credits the first day. The attendant processed 3 separate cash advance requests over the following 48 hours, each time hoping Catherine would take a break, walk away. Let the compulsion fade, but casino policies strictly prohibited employees from suggesting a player stop or expressing concern about losses. By Sunday evening, Catherine had cycled through $38,000 of that insurance money, chasing the major progressive that never triggered despite gold FABAT symbols appearing with enough frequency to convince her the pattern was developing. The former employee who witnessed this stated in a documented interview that she watched Catherine's hands physically shake as she pressed the spin button during the final hours. And what made the situation even more devastating was that management reviewed security footage of Catherine's session afterward, not to discuss intervention protocols, but to analyze what kept her engaged for 72 hours and how they could encourage similar dedication from other players. The cultural symbols throughout 88 Fortunes, the gold coins, the traditional Chinese music, the phoenix and turtle imagery, these design elements specifically target older Asian players according to former marketing analysts who worked on demographic research, and the near-miss programming on gold symbols happens at rates that former technicians describe as mathematically impossible under true random distribution. Machine number 6, Devil's Lock. And this machine actually sparked regulatory investigations in Nevada, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, according to documented Gaming Commission inquiries. What made Devil's Lock particularly controversial among former employees was the losses disguised as wins programming, where the game triggers celebration animations and victory sound effects for outcomes that pay less than the amount you wagered. Former slot technicians report an RTP range between 84 and 86%. But the psychological damage comes from how your brain processes these false victories. When you bet 50 cents and win 30 cents, the machine erupts with flashing lights, dramatic music, and escalating audio cues identical to legitimate wins. And according to former employees who watched players for hours, most people didn't consciously register that they just lost 20 cents because the presentation framework insisted they'd won. A former floor supervisor testified during one regulatory inquiry that he personally observed players celebrating these micro losses hundreds of times per shift. And management specifically instructed staff to position Devil's Lock machines near casino entrances because watching other people appear to win constantly was the most effective advertisement for pulling new players onto the floor. The investigation results concluded that while the practice was technically legal under existing gaming regulations, multiple commissioners expressed concern about the ethical implications, but no enforceable rules were changed. Which, according to former compliance officers, means the programming remains active on these machines today. And now, machine number 7, Gambino Slots Premium Cabinet versions, the machine that several former employees independently identified as the single worst option on any casino floor. The skill suggestion deception model makes these games appear to involve player decision making, brief moments where you select symbols or choose paths. But former technicians who access the source code confirm that every outcome is predetermined before you touch the screen. The RTP range sits between 82 and 85%, according to internal documentation, the lowest of any machine we've discussed, and the minimum bet requirements run between $1 and $5 per spin, depending on denomination, which means your bankroll depletes at a rate that former employees describe as genuinely alarming to witness. There's an extreme case documented in bankruptcy court filings involving a player named Kevin who maintained a casino host relationship for 3 months before financial collapse. According to testimony and submitted evidence, Kevin lost $60,000 on Gambino premium cabinets between January and March of 2021. And what made his situation particularly predatory was how the host system amplified his gambling. Every major loss triggered offers for complimentary hotel rooms, free meal vouchers, and exclusive event invitations, and a former casino host admitted in a deposition that they received specific training to target players on premium cabinet games because the combination of high minimum bets and low RTP created the fastest path to significant player losses, which paradoxically qualified those players for increasingly generous comps that made them feel valued and encouraged continued play. The premium cabinet design itself, leather seating, enhanced sound systems, not larger screens creates what former employees call the VIP illusion, and the community screen feature that displays other players' wins makes you feel connected to a network of successful gamblers, even though you're watching a curated highlight reel that doesn't reflect actual odds. Former technicians report that bonus features trigger approximately once every 200 to 250 spins, and the average payout ranges between 8 and 15 times your bet, which means at a $5 minimum wager, you're investing $1,000 to $1,250 to trigger a bonus worth $40 to $75. Multiple former slot attendants mentioned in documented interviews that they personally refused to direct players toward Gambino machines when asked for recommendations. And one former operations manager stated that monthly revenue meetings specifically highlighted these cabinets with celebration and discussion of strategies to increase player traffic to them. Now that you understand which 6 machines represent the worst mathematical and psychological traps on the casino floor, there's something critical about the broader industry trend that explains why this information matters more now than ever before. Former employees with 10-plus years of experience report that RTP percentages have declined measurably across nearly all major manufacturers over the past decade. And the regulatory gaps that allow practices like losses disguised as wins. Programming mean player protections haven't kept pace with increasingly sophisticated psychological manipulation techniques. The one good machine we discussed at the beginning, that classic Wheel of Fortune with the mechanical wheel, is actively being phased out according to former floor managers who've seen the replacement schedules. Casinos have 5 and 10-year plans to eliminate anything above 90% RTP. And what that means for players is the mathematical advantage is shifting even further toward the house with each new cabinet installation, which is precisely why former employees decided the risk of speaking out was worth it before these last few player-friendly options disappear completely. If you want to protect yourself next time you walk onto a casino floor, the classic Wheel of Fortune quarters with the actual mechanical wheel remains your mathematically safest option. But you need to know how to identify it correctly because casinos have introduced multiple variants designed to look similar while offering significantly worse odds. The visual marker that matters most is the physical spinning wheel mounted on top of the cabinet, an actual mechanical component you can see rotate when the bonus triggers, not a video simulation on a screen, regardless of how realistic the graphics appear. Former slot technicians emphasize that if the machine says Deluxe, HD, or any designation suggesting it's an updated version, walk away immediately because those variants typically operate with RTP percentages 6 to 8 points lower than the original mechanical wheel versions. The quarter denomination specifically offers the sweet spot according to internal data, while dollar denominations on the same machine often reduce the RTP to the 88 to 90% range. And former floor managers report these machines are most commonly positioned in high traffic areas near casino entrances or adjacent to poker rooms where they'll attract maximum attention. Understanding what 92 to 94% RTP actually means in practical terms requires realistic expectation setting that former employees wish more players grasped before sitting down. That percentage indicates that over millions of spins, the machine will return $92 to $94 for every $100 wagered. But your individual session will experience variance that can swing dramatically in either direction. What the better RTP provides is slower bankroll depletion on average, more time playing per dollar invested, and slightly higher probability of hitting enough mid-range wins to extend your session or walk away roughly even. But it absolutely does not guarantee profit or eliminate the house edge that ensures casinos make money over time. Now, the 6 machines you should avoid completely. Let me recap the specific warning that makes each one particularly dangerous according to former employees. Buffalo Gold combines extreme volatility with super bonus traps that trigger far less frequently than the math requires for profitable play. Lightning Link uses hold and spin features where the average bonus payout rarely justifies the investment required to trigger it. Or Dragon Link targets players with progressive meter illusions while maintaining the same poor hold percentage across all denominations. Buffalo Diamond deliberately degraded a trusted game to extract more money from loyal players. 88 Fortunes uses cultural symbols and gold few bat programming to create pattern recognition illusions that keep vulnerable players chasing progressives that almost never hit. Devil's Lock celebrates your losses as wins through manipulative audio and visual design. And Gambino Premium cabinets combine the lowest RTP on the floor with predatory host systems and minimum bet requirements that destroy bankrolls faster than nearly any other option in the casino. The pattern connecting all 6 is the combination of low RTP percentages, psychological manipulation through sound and visual design, and bonus feature structures mathematically designed to return less value than the cost to trigger them. Former employees are speaking out now because the industry trend continues moving toward worse player odds, more sophisticated manipulation techniques, and the systematic removal of the few remaining machines where the math works even marginally in your favor. The regulatory environment hasn't caught up to these practices, and according to former compliance officers, the gaps in oversight mean casinos operate with near complete freedom to engineer games specifically designed to maximize time on device and minimize player awareness of actual loss rates. Multiple former workers documented these patterns because they felt genuine moral obligation after watching thousands of players lose money on machines whose programming they knew was designed to create illusion of winning opportunity while mathematically guaranteeing the opposite outcome. If this information could save you thousands of dollars over your lifetime of casino visits, make sure you're subscribed because former employees continue reaching out with documentation about specific games, particular casino policies, and industry practices that management never intended for players to understand. Let me know in the comments if you've experienced these exact patterns yourself. If you've sat at these machines and watched your bankroll disappear exactly as these former employees described, because that collective validation is part of what makes this information credible and what gives other industry workers the courage to come forward with what they know. Share this with anyone in your life who visits casinos because the knowledge of which machines operate with better odds and which ones are specifically engineered to take your money as quickly as possible is information that casinos have spent enormous resources trying to keep from public awareness. I'm not telling you not to gamble. That's a personal choice every adult has the right to make. But I am telling you that you now have access to insider knowledge about how to gamble smarter. Which machines give you the best mathematical chance, and which ones former employees themselves refuse to play even with their own employee comp credits. Before these machines disappear entirely from casino floors, before policies change, before the last few player-friendly options get replaced with even more predatory alternatives, use this information to protect yourself. And in the next video, I'll reveal the 3 critical mistakes that even smart players make on that one good machine. Aight. Errors that can turn a mathematical advantage into a losing session because knowing which machine to play is only half the equation. And what former dealers are saying about optimal betting strategy will completely change how you approach that mechanical wheel.